Can I ask Pak Christo and Kanti to turn off the video? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Let's Talk DRR 3 Future of the Human Behavior and Hazard in 2045. My name is Afifa Tajratul Muawana from the Inspire Alliance, and I will be the MC for today. We sincerely thank you for joining us. May I remind all participants to kindly keep your mic muted. And if you would like to raise questions or comments, kindly type in Q&A box. The moderator will call on the participants. Please be informed that this webinar will be recorded for documentation purposes. This Let's Talk DRR is a part of the Future Thinking on Disaster Risk Reduction activities under the collaboration of Unesco Regional Science Bureau for Asia and Pacific, Jakarta, Indonesia, UNDRR Regional Office for Asia and Pacific, Bangkok, Thailand, and UNDP Accelerator Lab, Indonesia, and Inspire Alliance. It is a follow-up activity for the first Future Literacy Laboratory on Disaster Knowledge that was held virtually online until 11 February 2022. We are happy to let you know that we have 30 young professionals from Asia and Africa with us who will share their collective thoughts on the future of human behavior and hazard in 2045. And we have prominent speakers that will share their reflections on the future thinking and DRR. Ms. Leah Hoses, Associated Project Officer for Future Literacy, Social and Humanist Science UNESCO, Mrs. Irina Rafisiliana, PhD researcher at the German Development Institute and University Bonn, researcher of Indonesian National Researcher and Innovation Agency. Ms. Iria Tozen Kale from Risk Knowledge and DRR Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and Mr. Christian Budi for Resilience and Reconstruction Unit UNDP Indonesia. Please monitor the announcement in the Zoom and the Facebook live chat on the how to ask question fill in the attendance from and other information related to the speaker and topics. Without further ado, let's start with the first session on the introduction to the Future Literacy Laboratory on Disaster Risk Reduction. We would like to invite Mr. Rohmi Akbar to moderate the first session on brief introduction of future literacy. Mr. Rohmi, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Afifa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rohmi Akbar from the Social and Humanities Science UNESCO Jakarta office. I would like to invite Ms. Lia Shoshi to open up the camera, please. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have Ms. Lia Shoshi here from the Future Literacy UNESCO. Before we proceed her presentations, allow me to introduce her. Lia Shoshi is an Associate Project Officer, Future Literacy at UNESCO, under the guidance of the Head of Future Literacy UNESCO, Dr. Riel Miller. She has become an experienced facilitator and lab designer. She completed her master degree in international negotiation in 2019 and wrote her master degree thesis in innovative character of the Future Literacy Project and its flagship of the UNESCO positioning as a global laboratory of ideas. Lia is now working as a lab designer and the Francophone liaison for the Future Literacy team at UNESCO. She will speak as the co-lead of the core team for the future thinking of the RR initiative since May 2021. So Lia, thank you for having me. It is nice to have you with us. And we thank you for your enormous support and your team in our activities. I strongly believe that our audience here would like to hear from you about what future literacy is, why is it important, why UNESCO advocating this.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Rahmi, for this introduction, and thank you for having me today. A lot of questions in one, but I will try my best to answer them. What futures literacy is? To answer this, I want to deconstruct it. So what is future? Future is a conception, is a human conception. It doesn't exist, actually. It doesn't exist in the present. It only exists in a way that you anticipate it. So it's a conscious human creation by our mind. And the term literacy means that you can learn how to use it. So futures literacy is a capability to understand why and how we anticipate. It's a skills that allow people to better understand the role of the future in what they see and do in the present. Anyone can become more skilled at this capability, more skilled as being futures literate. And it's because of two facts. One, as I said, the future does not exist. It can only be imagined. And two, humans have the capability to imagine. As a result, humans are able to imagine the future in different way, for different reasons, in different contexts. And therefore, they're able to become futures literate. Why is it important? As I said, the way we imagine the future has a direct impact on our action in the present. The way I imagine tomorrow will have an impact on how I choose to dress myself or which action I'm going to take for my job or my personal life. It is important to be aware of how we imagine, to be able to better harness it for our own purpose. And it's like, I want to say, it's like wearing glasses. Futures literacy make it easier to see the world around us in more details. It make it easier to detect and invent new ideas, new changes. And why UNESCO is advocating for futures literacy? Well, first, it comes from the world of UNESCO as a global laboratory of ideas. It's a role as a scientific part of the UN. And it's also part of our mandate in accompanying social transformation in human societies. So our goal by advocating for it at UNESCO is to integrate futures literacy as a mechanism to empower people and organizations around the world, be it civil service or private sector or governments, to be to diversify why and how they use the future. So UNESCO has started since 2012 to explore futures literacy and to build its proof of concept by Dr. Will Miller. And we are now working toward the democratization of futures literacy and to disseminate this capability to anyone.
Thank you. Interesting explanations on the conception of the future and how we harness about the future literacy itself. Since you and your team have been involved from the beginning of the Future Thinking Initiative activities in May 2021, my next question is like, how do you see future thinking could help disaster risk reductions?
So this is a big question. I will talk about how the future thinking can help disaster risk and reduction, but not only disaster risk and reduction. Future thinking can be applied to any subject. Here, what I said is that it has multiple purpose. So future thinking and futures literacy can bring forward new questions about the future that you may not have imagined before. It enhances, obviously, the capacity to use the future, and as a global vision, it changed the condition of change. So by using futures thinking or futures literacy or futures tool, the participants became more aware of this capability and can use it in their own work, in their own activities. And so for disaster risk and reduction, here it's even more important because of the pandemic, because of the current state of the world. The only certainty is uncertainty. So futures literacy solved a major problem for policymakers, especially in DRR, is how to change the way they integrate the future into the policy formation and choice. Here, futures, usually when we don't have the capacity of futures literacy, when we are futures illiterate, we are projecting the past into the future. We tend to reproduce our past action because it's the only thing that we know. And so we are perpetuating many ill choices or many different aspects that we want or wish to overcome. Here, futures literacy can bring one solution, and it's to rethink the way we use the future and how we integrate it in our work, and how especially we integrate it to answer disaster risk and reduction. And I really think that futures literacy, by giving insight into how people think about disaster risk and reduction, how they imagine the future of disaster risk and reduction, can give new ideas to policymakers.
It's amazing that I can underline that by being future illiterate, it means that we projecting the past precedents or activities in the future policy. And the next question is that, what is your reflections and how do you see the youth and young professionals who happen to work in disaster risk reductions could embrace its future literacy skills?
This is also a big question. I will maybe talk about the project that we are in, the futures thinking of disaster risk and reduction. The biggest tools that we use to make youth and young professional and everyone embrace this futures literacy skill is through futures literacy laboratories, futures FLL for those who knows. And FLL is the tools that we use to reveal how we think about the future, is to reveal how, on what basis are we imagining the future in disaster risk and reduction. And here in this instance, we did, for now, I think we did 4 labs together, and each lab is different because each co-design and each team of facilitator and co-designer is different. And more importantly, the participants themselves bring forward their own way of thinking about the future. And this richness of I want to say data, but this richness of gathering of ideas became bigger because they are sharing their different views and different ideas, and especially their different mechanism to think about the future. And by gathering all this, by sharing all this, they enhance each other's ability to think about the future. So here, especially for young professional, I think it's especially important because their capacity of thinking about the future is not as set as I would say older adults, and because they don't have the same bias about thinking about the future or the same experience. And it's also very important because they are the future leaders. They are the one who will be in charge of shaping our future in 10, 15 years, hopefully. And one thing is, by understanding and learning the skill of futures literacy, they are better able to use the future in disaster risk and reduction, in resiliency also. You told me, and also co-design team, that DRR is not only 2R, but one more, it's resiliency. Yes. And to be able to implement new ideas, you directly have an impact on the condition of change in the world and in your work in DRR experts. And so here our activity, it's a start for giving new ideas, new insights, new concept or models and frame to develop the disaster risk and reduction and resiliency. And I want to, one last thing is that by embracing uncertainty and complexity, you become more futures literate. It is a hard concept, but it's actually at the reach of anyone and everyone. And I want to say one last thing is that my supervisor, Dr. Will Miller, used to say a lot about to use a lot a quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein. I think I pronounced it right. Is getting hold of the difficulty deep down is what is hard, because if it is grasped near the surface, it simply remains the difficulty it was. We don't see it. It has to be pulled out by the roots, and that involves our beginning to think in a new way. Here, futures literacy, we have to look at the beginning of our imagination to be able to better imagine.
Amazing, Leah. It's a brief but expanding our horizon about the future literacy. It seems that we need to underline is that being future literate is very, very essential for us, the youth and young professionals here. So we thank you, Ms. Leah Sushi, and you and your team for the enormous support from the beginning to us, and the brief information as well. For the audience that would like to be interested about the future literacy and the future literacy labs on disaster risk reductions, please kindly check in the chat box. And without further ado, let's now hear the collective thought of the young professional who participate in the last FLL on future of human behavior and hazard in 2045. And allow me to hand over the moderations to Ms. Patamon. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosmi, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Patamon Rongshwanon from the UNDP Accelerator Lab team in Thailand, and I'll be moderating this session. But before we start, I would like to remind all of you that if you have questions on the team presentation that you're about to hear, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box, and the presenting team will answer the questions there. Today we have 5 teams with us. They are from the Future Literacy Lab Laboratory on Disaster Risk Reduction. And each team consists of 6 young professionals with gender, region, age, and professional background balance. In this session, I will ask the representative from the team to share their collective thoughts and future scenario of human behavior and hazards in the year 2045. So I will let the team introduce their team members, and each team will have up to 10 minutes to share the results, the outputs, and conclusion of the team discussion on future human behavior and hazards. So without further ado, I would like to take us all, let us travel to the year 2045 to listen and learn about the human behavior and hazard in that year. I would like to first invite the Alpha team, Ms. Himani Tiwari. The time is yours.
Thank you. Could please share the screen before I begin? Hello, everyone. Very good afternoon to each one of you present here. So here I was one of the participants in the FLL DRR 3. Where we had to decide, we have to imagine that what would be the future of the human behavior and the hazards in the coming years to come, and specifically in 2045. We had the members, the participants from different nations, including India, Indonesia, Philippines, Nepal, and Singapore. And I'm representing here on behalf of the Alpha team. So before I move forward, I wish to, it's a pleasure to have you all on this platform, and all the participants and all those the eminent personalities who are listening to me. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So first of all, to begin with, the 3-day session on the Future Literacy Lab, it was very engaging, and it unleashed the power of imagination on on how the future of human behavior and hazards would be in the coming years. Okay, so the first scenario was on identifying that what would be the relationship between the human hazard and the disasters in the coming years, keeping into mind the present scenario. Okay, then we have to imagine the probable futures. Okay, so when we did it, the team came up with the diverse opinions. So we have classified into the two things. The one is optimistic, the one other is pessimistic. So let's come to the pessimistic first. So many of the participants, they said that obviously in 2045, looking at the present scenario, there will be more disasters and extreme weather events. There will be the frequency of the anthropogenic hazards will be very high. There will be conflicts, increased conflicts among the community, and also humanity will let it sprint. Okay, then coming on to the optimistic part. Okay, then many of us be focused on how we can do the extensive use of tool-based approaches and how the advanced technology like AI and machine learning, it can be leveraged to effectively manage the disasters. Secondly, how to optimally use the nature-based solutions to reduce the disaster risk. Because we know, because when you talk about the nature-based solutions, it is the indigenous knowledge or the indigenous community that have a great role to play in that. Third opinion was that the humans will be more responsible and there will be more awareness of the potential hazards that they can create. That means they have risk knowledge. Then the next would be that a disaster management study, it would be mandatory integrated in the school curriculum as it is done in Japan. Then there would be a more focus on inclusive and sustainable development. And the idea of resilience, it will not just be confined to the sectoral sectors, be it airport, be it health, be it disaster, but it will also be integrated in a personal lives. For example, if I go to a walk, or if I take a scooter or anything, then if I'm wearing a helmet, then it means that, okay, I'm taking some measures to be safe and to be resilient in case any hazard happens. So this is something that has to be integrated in the personal lives. And most importantly, there's a need that the trade-offs between the development and disaster risk in 2045 will reduce. Because currently we see that many hydropower projects are there, the development is happening, which may be at the cost of nature, and it may increase the disaster risk. It may, undo the development gains. Okay, so for all these opinions were there, and we categorized into optimistic and pessimistic. However, in the end, we came to the conclusion that onus is on us. What we want. We wanted to go in the direction. Obviously, the risk cannot be prevented. How just to meet it. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. No, this was a very engaging exercise in which what we basically did is, now we have come to the year 2045. Okay. What we did here, we took lessons from the past scenario, which was before 2045. We assessed the present scenario, which is 2045, and coupling the past and the present scenario, we build some trajectory or some of the probable scenarios that could be there in the future, that is after 2045. Okay, so let me come back to it one by one. So coming to the weight of the past, which is before 25. Okay, so these are what might be the key factors or the drivers that have led to the take probable measures in the future. So some could be there was an increase in extreme weather events and disaster. For example, in 2022, we are witnessing it. We have the complex hazard scenario before 2045, for example, COVID-19 and other disasters coming that have increased the systemic and the cascading risk, leading to the collapse of the health infrastructure systems. Okay, there might be the haphazard construction is there, which is leading to the increased disaster risk. There are many technological constraints, and there's lack of community participation and effective DRR governance, which is leading us to take several measures forward. And then there's a limited understanding of the disaster risk transfer mechanisms like insurance. Okay. Now moving forward comes to the push of the present. So these are the various factors that pushed us. Okay. This gives us a need for the take measures in the present. Now in 2045, we imagine that, okay, so disasters will be there. Obviously, they will be there, resulting massive losses to life and property. There will be increase in the multi-hazard scenarios. However, tools and solutions will be designed to reduce disaster risk, but we would need to implement it in real sense at the ground level. But that would be very limited. Okay, so we have taken the lessons from the past. We have now analyzed the present scenario. Now we are just framing the future, which is the pull of the future. So we imagine that there would be accuracy in weather forecasting. There will be well-established early warning systems and disaster risk transfer mechanisms. The much more focus on the participatory approaches would be there. The involvement of the local governments and community will be there in designing the solutions of the tools. The AI integrated tools in community-based approaches would be there for solving the various cross-cutting issues. There will be high institutional preparedness in responding to any pandemic or any health emergency. Okay, then there was a very negative that obviously all these factors, they may be that there will be divisions among the people in the society, or the people can become more responsible. So the past and the future and the present, it decides what we are going to be in the future. Okay, moving forward, can you next please? Okay, now coming to the desirable futures. So when we talked about the probable futures, okay, this can be the scenario. Desirable futures is like, it has no limit. It can be, it may not be truly realistic, but we just thought in that way that people may wear the smartwatch, which regularly inform them about the hazards. Okay, there will be more use of the technosocial approaches. Okay, there will be the optimal utilization of the natural resources by the communities and utilization of the nature-based solution to reduce disaster and climate risk, a more focus on well-established practices on climate change adaptation, well-implemented disaster risk transfer mechanisms, specifically in the developing in the underdeveloped countries. Then there will be well-established systems. Systems can be any forecasting system, early warning system in the rural areas for saving the lives and property of the people. And coming from that chemical disaster perspective, then or other aspect, we can say that there will be reduced sewage disposal from the industry. So these are basically the opinions of the participants in alpha groups when it comes about the desirable futures. Yeah, can we move ahead? Okay, so after that, we had to form the causal layered analysis. Okay, in this section, basing all our exercises from the past, we have to do a number of things. First of all, we have to think that in 2045, what could be the probable headline, okay, that can be reflected in the paper, I mean, the scenario. Then we have to identify the actors. Okay, who would be the actors? If you have to narrate a story, then who would be the actors in your story? Then what systems are you going to consider? Is it, are you focusing it? Then the worldview, what would be the worldview at that time? Is it about being resilient? Is it about being prepared? And then what would be the myths or metaphors at it in 2045? Okay, so these are some of the collective headings of the group, that humans are more collaborative and cooperative, given that one's survival depends on others. Human beings are more aware of finding solutions in the present situation. They know how to leverage the information and communication technology tools to reduce disaster risk. There will be more community involvement, empowerment, and there would be robust health infrastructure resilience based on the lessons that we have learned from COVID-19. Okay, so these were the different ideas of the headline from the group. Can we move ahead? Yeah, so now I'm going to narrate. So we took one example and we compiled in the form of a narrated a story and a sort of a report, reporting we did it. So here we did, so it was based on the robust health infrastructure. We gave the headline, aided with the incident response system, it mitigated disaster impacts and saved lives. So actors here, we were the healthcare professionals, and they are just like telling about the experiences that from COVID-19 and how the healthcare infrastructure resilience system has been, strengthened. Then when it comes about the system, we talked about that the healthcare institutions, they followed a very holistic system approach, considering of the operational aspects, technical aspects, and all the inclusivity in mental health. The worldview at the time would be is to create a culture of preparedness. Okay, and our probable myth was that we have to unlock the infinite powers of a resilient health system, and many more to come. Yeah, can you please go ahead? So these are some of the new questions that how we can integrate the idea of disaster resilience in personal lives. What are the various ways to develop sectoral resilience? How to implement the tools, technologies at the ground levels? How to unlock the potential of DRF mechanisms? How to improve the data management and the devolution of powers. Next slide, please. I'm just summarizing it, just like last slide. Yeah, so our team's conclusion was we found that future literacy, it is an amalgamation of both theory and practice. Okay, it is a tool that can not only be utilized in the domain of disaster management, but also in policy making, conceptualizing tools, and also in our personal lives. And ultimately, we realized that it is the humans who frame the policies, hence the need is to be more future literate in order to formulate the actionable policies and reduce disaster risk. And last but not the least, we know that today is the future of tomorrow. So whatever actions we take today and summarizing it with the past experiences is how we build or pave path for a brighter future. So thank you. These were the opinions from ILFA Group. Thank you for letting me represent it.
Thank you very much, the Alpha team, for a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. That's, I think, very interesting to hear from the first team. To not waste any time, let's now turn to the second team, the Bravo team. I would like to invite Dr. Aya Afifa Abu Talib to present a result from the Bravo team. The time is yours, Dr. Aya.
Thank you. Hold on now. Sorry. Sure. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you to moderators, the honorable speakers and fellow audience. So on this very fine day, I am delighted to present about the FLL on the futures of human behavior and hazards in 2045. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Ali Afifa Abu Talib. I am a young professional from Malaysia, and I'll be sharing the collective thoughts from my team Bravo. Right, so in these collective thoughts, it will consist of 4 segments. There are probable futures, triangle, desirable futures, reframe, and new questions. So without further ado, let's join our journey to travel to 2045. So here we go. All right, in these probable futures, triangle for the present year 2045, we envision that the human behavior had molded into a rapid development culture where there is an increase of demand and needs due to the rising of human population. So the human desires that cause rapid development are foreseen prone to affect our forests or natural capacity, which this we predict that the global agenda on sustainable development goals on reducing climate change may not be achieved, and yet it is still increased. So which to that, we believe that these alarming unresolved climate change issues would probably cause to an increase of the frequency of hazards to occur and may severely affect all living things. Although if we're reflecting prior year 2045, this day we already witnessed that many human behavior are still conducting activities that affects our nature. For example, the unresolved mass deforestation issues, which we can see the humans are still heavily active in this destructive project. With that, it does not just affect the forest, but also affects our natural resources, such as clean water resources. The increased hazard occurs, such as pandemic, the earthquake, the flood, and etc. So when the hazard occur, these are not just affect the human, but also heavily affected to other living things like animals who lost their habitat. Therefore, from this negative perspective, issues occur due to the human behavior. We highly desire to see the future after 2045 to bring a good cause. So for example, humans should preserve our nature or forests to protect from hazards to occur. On top of that, this would bring a good cause for the flora and fauna from being extinct. In this era, the idea that we come out is to forbid the use of timber or wood. There will be paperless, no pencils produced, and no such aesthetic products made from timber. In other words, the demands from the timber wood is not allowed. Instead, in this future, it is predicted to fully utilize technology through creative innovation. And with that, this could shape the human behavior to be more event-oriented person. Perhaps by this year, the future after 2045, a new technology to detect the probable hazards to occur has been invented. Perhaps this new technology device allow us to be able to communicate with the animals. Why we come up with this idea based on the true events and the observation from disaster victims. They realized that some of these animals somehow had the sense they could detect, some of these animals had sense and they could detect the coming hazards about to happen. So therefore, with the invented technology or availability of this device for communications between humans and animals, this could be very helpful to lower the effects of hazard as we could make early preparation. So for the desirable futures, basically we concluded that that we want and we desire a future that humans by right should behave parallel to a well-educated manner. Shaping this well-educated manner could possibly to revise the education system and consider the adoption of hazard education in the early year at the primary schools. By that, this may influence the human behavior since the early stage to be more aware and be more responsible on the use of natural resources. Therefore, in this manner, the rapid development will be able to overcome and the nature is being well preserved and reduce the consequences such as less hazards to occur and animals are safe and sound. So further, it is reframe segments through the causal analysis technique, where this technique is for approach for strategic planning and futurology to be more effectively shape the future. Consists of headlines, actors, system, worldview, and myth. So in this analysis, we come up with three perspectives. The first sector is the society or the community with which the headlines are we belong together. The system in this perspective involves a community tail, which means due to the lack of community resilience system in rescue. So in the worldview phase, the community should establish rescue support for an immediate response instead of waiting for a governance support. And the myth of this perspective is used to say that leave no one behind. The second perspective headline is that the water conservation is important. The actor is representing the water for, sorry, the actor is representing benefit for all living things. For the system is the human should act sustainably for a clean water supply. In the world viewpoints, humans should be responsible and manage wisely the use of natural resources for freshwater supply. And the myth for this respective perspective, it is always believed that the freshwater supply is always available. On the third headline is the Earth on the brink of mass extinction. The actors are the animals. The system in this perspective is to stop deforestation, use sustainability products. Further, in the worldview phase, humans should employ aggressive animal conservation to protect these animals from being extinct. And the myth or metaphors for this perspective is extinct of endangered species or animals does not affect ecosystem nor even cause any hazards. All right, so that is basically the perspective we've seen through the causal analysis approach. So moving on to the last step, the new questions. Through our travel journey in 2045 and back to the actual year, there are a series of questions that we've thought about. For the underlying assumptions, the question is that to what extent human behavior needs to realize, change, and be responsible for their greediness acts which can cause such massive disasters. So what is new? Human demand for new developments leads to destructive other living things. What is the same? The same greediness act of human behavior on exploits the natural resources could harm the future of new generations and our ecosystem. What is change? Through embed education could change human behavior to be more responsible and act wisely. But why, who, and how? Why it is important for humans should aware of the consequences from their acts and greedy behavior. Who should be responsible for the scarcity of natural resources, that occurrence of a disaster event, and the failure of the ecosystem that leads to mass extinction? How human needs to stop mass extinction that disrupt ecosystem and hazard. So with that questions, I reflect this matter with a quotation from Dr. Jane Goodall regarding the human behavior. She said that every individual matters, every individual has a role to play, and every individual makes a difference. On the other hand, reflecting to the consequences of the human behavior that could cause and drives towards the animal extinction, according to Anthony Douglas Williams, once says that there are more dangerous humans on Earth than dangerous animals. So are we prepared to change and be responsible for our behavior in order to minimize these hazards from being occur, including to stop this animal being extinct? With that questions, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aya, and thank you for all the members of the Bravo team for a very interesting presentation and food for thoughts about how it's not only about the humans, but also the animals that are sharing our world. So when we think about the future, it's not only about us, but them as well. So without further ado, I would like to move on to listen to the Charlie team as well. I would like to invite Ms. Kanti Kativada and Ms. Norma Miyani Shamsher from the Charlie team to share their thoughts on this topic as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, and my name is Kanti. I am from Nepal.
And I'm Norma from Indonesia.
We will be representing in behalf of Charlie Group today. Apart from us, we have our imaginative and enthusiastic team members, Trevi and Dian from Indonesia, Ori Hambo from Kenya, and Cesar from Timor-Leste. Our lovely and amazing facilitators, Noor and Sophia, of course, with observers Apurva and Grazida. Now, let's begin the travel to future 2045 about human behavior and hazards. We, Charlie, imagine the probable human behavior in 2045 as innovative, conscious, collaborative, and resilient. Innovative in terms of focusing on technological innovations, smart technologies in use, and application-driven society. Conscious on maintenance of environmental sustainability and ecology. Collaborative enough on efforts toward development, knowledge sharing, learning and operating, and focus on human rights too. Resilient enough to tackle situational changes and hazards using capabilities and knowledge, navigating uncertainty and volatility. And these are the pros of the human behavior in 2045. However, we have also reflected some of the cons, like highly civilized society, but being on the brink of damage or success depends on human behavior, increase of man-made hazards with emerging developments and innovations, too smart and busy life can cause mental health decline, lack of empathy, and human connection problems. And talking about the hazards, of course, there will be hazards, sometimes predictable and sometimes unpredictable. But we believe in 2045, humans can develop resiliency, helping self and others using their capability and knowledge. Next slide, please. Okay, there is the future triangle 2045, which is a very amazing triangle where there is the weight of history, push of the present, and pull of the future. As we have already seen our past, like we all have faced the same situation, the pandemics of COVID-19, and we have also observed different natural disaster and hazards. So actually, there was lack of proper development in the past, and the time was most spent on managing hazards and developing technologies. So we would like to take the weight of the history as a crawling development phase. And talking about push of the present, we Charlie take it as a pandemic to progressive situation, where there we have to manage the drawbacks of the past, and also there we have to maintain the pull of the future. So there is a need of the speedy and smart efforts, action, and collaboration towards creation of better world through adaptation, recreation, innovation, fast technological essays, and of course, priority to mental health too. And the pool of the future, if we talk about, as we said before in the probable future, is dynamic world of innovation, intelligence, creativity, smartness, sustainability, but also there is a fear of having no privacy of life in a technologically driven world with new hazards. There may be loss of human wisdom. However, these are some of the probabilities we predicted. Now let's move to the next slide. The desirable futures Charlie desire to have is we assume about their desired futures is we assume maximum probability of good and positive things and minimum probability of bad and negative things. Charlie's desire. People are living healthier lives, more creative and caring to the environment, ecology and green technology applied in all sectors. Human solidarity and fellowship, focus on human rights, open to our criticisms, knowledge sharing, and of course, advanced technologies in use, like in every sector, education, health, transportations, will create a healthy and happy environment. In summary, we predict the desirable future as a smart, happy, healthy future. Moving towards the next slide. Reframing human behavior and hazards in 2045. Actually, in this page, we went through a lot of role plays and many things. A scenario where Charlie went through that there are only man-made hazards affecting thousands of lives. Humans hold good values about life and are optimistic towards saving others' lives and developing systems for individuals to help each other. Charlie shared the common belief that human has a heart which is filled with empathy, which holds a common vision of helping others and saving lives, empowering self and community. We also believe community empowerment, education and knowledge sharing with family, friends, and community, building sister resilient village will help to develop resiliency in people, motivate, prepare people to towards less harm and save more lives together. And not to forget, the major priority of concern we observe is about the stakeholders and concerned authorities' implementation of strict rules toward human rights and development is the most needed thing to design a better, happy, and healthy environment worldwide. Now, I would like to hand over the remaining presentation to friend Nurma. Over to you, Nurma.
Okay, thank you, Kanti. Now we continue with the underlying assumptions. After we do reframing, we make a list of underlying assumptions. We think that in 2045, there is diversity in thinking about futures, and then artificial intelligence domination. And also future is about being creative with limited resources and learning to work with others to share workloads. Next slide, please. And then comes several new questions, such as how do we prepare for future hazards? How can we empower communities in order to co-create desirable futures? And then how will human behavior shape the futures of DRR? How to issue policies that include human behavior and DRR? And will man-made hazard be the norm of life? Next. At the end, we agree that now we know there are three key takeaways from Future Literacy Lab. The first is the ability for young people to become aware of why and how they use the future. The second is to develop and improve our resilience. And the third is to engage the community. As defined by the Unesco, futures literacy is when people are capable of deciding why and how to use the future. They become better able to detect and create it. Otherwise invisible innovation and transformation. They are more at ease with novelty and experimentation, less anxious about uncertainty, humbler about controlling the future, more confident about being able to comprehend and appreciate the potential opened up by change. Next slide, please. And it is a quote from Herman Kahn about future. Projecting a persuasive image of a desirable and practical future is extremely important to hide moral, to dynamism, to consensus, and in general, to the wheels of society turn smoothly. Okay, that's all from us. Thank you for your attention. Stay happy, stay healthy. Warm regards from our team, Charlie's Angel.
Thank you very much, Charlie Angel's team, as you kindly rename your group. That's wonderful. Thank you for your excellent presentation. And it's nice to hear your perspective about the future, as you put it, the smart, happy, and healthy future. So next, I would like to turn to the Delta team. I'd like to invite Mr. Pratik Satyo and Mr. Muhammad Said Sakabwana to present the summary from Delta Group, please. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. We are Delta team, and we would like to present our discussion about the future of human behavior and hazard in 2025. And first of all, we would like to express our gratitude for giving us a chance to speak in this forum. And for our team, Hasbi, Ryan, and Susan, thank you very much. You are awesome and great people. And for our facilitator, Rahma, Indrajit, and Anggi, and also our observers, Irina, Kritis, and Alia. And maybe for a little summary about what we are doing in the 3-day workshop. We discussed about the future of human behavior and hazard in 2045. And of course, we discussed one of them is how human behavior and hazard change in 2045. For the first side, we have a probable future, and it's a future we most likely to face if we don't solve the problem in the present. And there are 6 hazards. The first one is man-made hazard. One of them is war and probably economic hazard, inflation, and nuclear. And the second one is food scarcity. Because there's more population, more human, I mean there are more food to produce. And of course, one of the solutions that implemented right now is vertical farming. And the third one is insufficient energy, because it's the same problem, the population one, because we need more energy for more people. And the fourth one is change of human behavior because of natural hazard. As you know that natural hazard is a cycle, it can be prevented, but disaster, we can prevent that. And because of natural hazard is also not static, because it's always changing, it's dynamic. And fifth one is living space crisis. It also refers to the population problem, because more people need more space, right? We all need a home, need a house. And the last one is the pandemic. We learned that the COVID-19 is still not finished yet. There's some mutation and all that stuff. And it's probably not the only pandemic that we would like to face, because the future is uncertain. And this is probable future, the triangle one. There's 3 major points. The first one is rate of the past, I mean before 2045, and second one is push of the present in 2045, and the third one is pull of the future after 2045. We have a lot of discussion in our workshop, and we take 3 major points. The first one is like knowledge about disaster and hazard, because more our goal is like more people know about disaster. I mean, some people still misunderstood about what is a hazard and what is a disaster. And the second one is natural hazard. First is always cycle, as I said, it's always happening. We can stop that. And the third one is economic bubble. Is the economic aspect of the disaster. One of them is inflation and resources. As we know that resource is very important. And the second one is push of the present. The first one is the inflation, the economic aspect of the disaster, as I said before. And the second one, learning from the pandemic, fighting the unexpected, because the pandemic right now is certainly, we don't expect we're gonna have a pandemic, and we are still struggling with the pandemic right now. I think we need to learn from this pandemic about how we handle the unexpected and the pandemics in the future. And the third one is clean water crisis, because it's become a major problem for the future. I mean, we gonna have a more population, more human, and one of the basic needs that of the human is clean water. And the third one is pool of the future after 2020 and 45. One of them is advanced technology. Advanced technology, because technologies keep growing right now, especially the AI and machine learning, and it can be our hope for the disaster and hazard. It can also become a disaster, because if we don't handle it carefully, it can be quite catastrophic. The second one is the mental issues, because we need to have a clear mental state of mind to handle the future, the disaster, and the hazard one. And the third one is sense of human behavior, because we keep adapting to the disaster and the hazard in the future. One of them is social aspect, economic aspect, also the culture, politics, and all other things. Now, we go to the next slide, which is desirable future. And desirable future is the future we would like to have, is our hope and our dream, is also the final goal. And the first one is the cooperation between countries for resilience. The second one is master plan for resilience. I think that we have a master plan for all disaster. Of course, each country faces different hazard, and master plan for resilience means that hopefully we can cover all of the hazard. It's flexible enough for each country to use this master plan. The third one is peace and safe place to live. Of course, we all want peace, and we all want a safe place for us to live. And the fourth one is the distribution of resource per need of the population. As I said, resource is very important for everyone, for every country. And redistribution is essentially vital for our survival, especially regarding disaster and hazard. And the second one, the sixth one is live side by side with nature. As we know that we can live without nature, we can live without earth. We need to conserve the nature. We need to live side by side. Of course, it's a major point in our discussion. And the last one is people understand about disaster and act on it. It's not enough to like know, but gain more knowledge about disaster, and we also need to act upon it. For a small example, our family, we all have a hazard in our country, and how we can make sure that our family is safe, our family is live comfortable by living side by side with hazard. And for this slide, I would like to Pratik to present.
Thank you, Said, for the introduction and the overview of the whole 2045 overview. So we have just reframed the process in terms of 4 major points. Mainly our discussion is thus the community-driven protocols are the major thing over there. But rather than the natural hazards, I think we'll see much more of a man-made hazards, and maybe the chaotic places will be much more from the people within themselves rather than the natural hazards. That is what to, and due to those scenario, I think there will be we have already witnessed the mental right. There is a institution aspect and the we have done. We think that chaotic situation is the new normal for the new community, and
I'm so sorry. I think Pratik is breaking up a little bit. Maybe problem with the signal. Would Mohammed be able to continue with the presentation?
Yes, I would like to continue the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yep. The reframe of the future is the first one is community driven protocol. Of course, it's not enough for only the government to handle the disaster. I mean, it's the community itself need to include it in policy making of the disaster. How the community make itself safe from the hazard. And the second one is man-made impact of psychology of an individual. As you know that man-made hazard is also rising right now. We're not only dealing with natural hazard, but also man-made hazard, and psychology of each individual is become important to fight the hazard itself. And the third one is fighting the hazard. It means also fighting the people, because as we all know that man-made hazard is also become a major issue right now, because the hazard is come from the people itself. I mean that we fighting the people. And of course, we need to find a solution about this. The first one is mental health issue on the rise. As you said, mental become very important right now, because we need to have a clear state of mind to handle the problem, the hazard, and also the disaster. And we also have causal layer analysis. This is the iceberg that we working on in our discussion. The first one is the major headline that we choose is chaos is the new normal, the making of the community, because society is always changing, also the hazard. It means that we need to adapt with the new changes. And second one is when we receive more life than doctor did in the future. We also advance that doctor can medical can cure most of the disease, and we choose between the two when it works, because we can the disease is more easily cured. We choose the one way instead of the doctor. And the third one is consumption behavior are changed. Multinational companies are not welcome. Because of this change, because of this adaptation, multinational companies are not welcome in every country. I mean that the local company are evolving more, and society itself from each country choose the local company more than the multinational company. And the fourth one is artists and art find a new approach. As we all know, culture is ever changing, it's dynamic, it's always growing, and artists find a new way to express themselves. It's also the same with art. And
so sorry, Mohammed. Very sorry to intervene again. Just that we are slightly a bit over time now. If you could wrap up the presentation, it would be highly appreciated. So sorry.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is our reflection. Chaos is the new normal. because it's technological advance. This means that AI and machine learning take more about our activity. And remaking of the community, as I said before, that we need to change, we need to adapt with the new challenge that we face. And this is the new question, how to make a change at all levels: education one, social and cultural, economic, and also policy changes. And this is our conclusion, different layers, sector factor in 2045, relating to positive and negative scenario. And also small action make large impact. And also we need to more adaptive about the change, and we also need to take more active action for the policy change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the Delta team member. Very, very interesting perspective, a very holistic one also. I understand it's very difficult to summarize everything within that 10-minute time. So thank you for your sharing. But we have one last team, last but not least though, is the ECHO team. I would like to invite Mr. Tushar Sitat Pradhan and Ms. Leslie Shatiningrum to take the floor. The time is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are Eco team, the last team for this event, FLL and DRR. So hello everyone, it is nice that I can be here to discuss with all of the participants about the future literacy. First of all, let me introduce the Eco group. We consist of Rusnaini, Swastika, Clario, Zahida, Tushar, and of course me, Leslie. But today, I and my colleagues Tushar will present the conclusion of Eco Group discussion about the future literacy in human behavior and hazard in 2045 regarding disaster risk reduction that already conducted for 3 days. Next, please. So you can see in these materials, this future triangle is our probable futures, human behavior and hazard in 2045. We have several points that we already imagine in 2045. Then we reflect it to present time and we elaborate it for the past, which means before 2045 to prevent or evaluate what should do. In this case, I would like to elaborate one point that we already wrote here about what happened after 2045. We imagine that in the future, the environment become cleaner, greener, and more beautiful. The human also become more adaptive to the changes. It makes us think how the present value in 2045. Human make more nature conservation and rehabilitation to build the future cleaner and greener. Also raising up the awareness in disaster risk reduction and always learning the new things to prepare the adaptive generation in the future. By all of the future literacy that we already make, we elaborate what should do before 2045. Is there any changes that we should act regarding our future? And we found that less consideration of nature, massive economic development will ruin our future imagination, so that we must change our behavior and way of life to make the better future. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. What is the desirable future that we imagine? First is human behavior is change. We hope we will have a better life in line with the changes of behavior and awareness, especially in disaster risk reduction. And the second is world peace and happiness through the entire world that rising the quality of life. And the third is the technology driven. Of course, yeah, with more AI innovation, we already see that nowadays many people cannot far away from technology, even a small thing. And the fourth is about the environment and energy, which with the 3 points before, human behavior, world peace, and technology driven, we hope that we assume that we can make cleaner environment and energy harvesting. And finally, by all the better conditions that we desire for the future, circular economy will rise and become the new habit, we hope. So next material will present by my colleagues to share. Could you please?
Thank you, Leslie. I will move forward for the presentation. Next slide, please. Yeah. So when you consider, like as my colleague has said, like as we transcend for imagining the future, we have seen the past, the weight of the past. We understood what current crises are and what future challenges will be. So imagining this forward and making these challenges, we came with a scenario wherein we had an opportunity to save ourselves. We have an opportunity to save others, but not ourselves. And due to the technological advancement, we have a good early warning system. But how can we transcend that knowledge? So the headline in the future in 2045 will be how to save life. And saving life is most important. When you talk of living on this planet, it's not just about humans, but we also need to consider the ecology, the environment around which that sustains life. So it's important that when we look, we have a broader view, not just restricting ourselves to the humans, but also the other race, the plants, insects, the flora and fauna, which are most important. So who will be the key actors in responding to this key challenge? These are the governments, the local, national, subnationals, the private sector, the NGOs, the donors, the academia, the key planners of the cities, as well as the community at large. So when we empower these actors, they will be able to take decisions, and that will be in conformity with not just living life, but also it will endorse a happy and sustainable life in the futures. So what system they will be pondering upon. So when we look at this actors, there need to be a cohesion, collaboration, partnership among these actors to build upon a future that is more resilient and inclusive. So what system that will be involved? Most probably we will be having an understanding of preparing contingency planning, wherein we are, as we face crisis, we understand that we need to prepare for. So more disaster risk resilient will be focused on, wherein it's not just about facing disaster, but pre-disaster. If you can capitalize that time and prepare action plans, it will be more resilient and robust, wherein you are not only reducing the existing risk, but also you are giving yourself an opportunity to reduce the future risk. So we need to be up this, and this system actually helps. How that can be propagated further through education, through empowering communities. When we say that this how can be done, it's the job of these actors and as well as ourselves. When we say that it's a whole of society approach, it's important that everybody needs to understand what are the learnings which we have of the past and how we can rectify it in the future, so that actions today which we take today, its impact will be on tomorrow. So that needs to be more resilient enough and also more thoughtful and more provoking. So also involving with multiple stakeholders actually is essential when we look at the things in perspective. And due to the aid of technological advancement, we need to understand that we need to also reach out to the last mile, which are resourceless, they don't have anything. So we need to actually bridge this gap through our educational system and through technical know-hows. These are the tools where we can reach out in the least span, and how we are able to communicate and transcend and reduce their risk is what is required. So the worldview what we will be having is like it will be more focused in 2045 will be on more disaster preparedness and more on human behavior, because it's like, take an example of plastic pollution, wherein this is human generated, but now we are considering its impact without considering our past, like it impacting a future, and it will be impacting a future generation as well. So we need to understand that we need to inculcate a habit of proactiveness, proactive risk reduction in society, wherein we are able to reduce the risk, but not just that, but also inculcate a habit of learning from the mistakes and going in a long way. So we came with the metaphor that since we are the cause, we should be the solution. Since human is the one who thinks, has an ability to think, and he has the ability to do and inculcate things and draw it in a conclusion. We have the imagination. So it's our moral responsibility of this, the planet, to take care of it, and the system that actually helps us in sustaining this planet, we need to be part of it, and we need to be the solution. Since we always play a blame game among ourselves, but it's crucial that we have an opportunity to ratify it through our own actions. So next slide, please. So when we reflect upon these challenges, we need to understand that our biggest mistake is we are not learning from our experience, the past experiences. it might be the disaster, it might be the challenges which we faced, but there are learnings involved in it. If an ounce of wisdom can be extracted and extrapolated from those experiences, we are able to actually learn more from it than rather than playing a blame game or wasting time in this. So a friend from Nepal, actually she actually summed up this reflection in a beautiful song of in Nepali, which says that human need to have that soft heart to consider about not just himself but also the animal kingdom, the flora and fauna. We face different climates, we face different challenges, but when we face this, we need to face with thorough courage to truth, and we need to have the hope not just for ourselves, for the future generation as well. As we are gentle to ourselves, we need to be gentle to everyone, and this is what is required. As we see, there are war, violence, there are different challenges which human faces. If we collaboratively and collectively work, we can able to reduce it. And it's important that when reflecting in 2040, it will be a challenge that there will be more technical advancement, but we also need to take care that with this development, there will be people who will be left out. We need to bridge that gap, and how we will be able to reaching that last mile, that is most important. So when we look at this reflections, our past actions is what we will be what the action today, the actions which we take today will be the reflections of tomorrow. So let our actions of today will be more holistic, understanding, and long lasting, more sustainable, so that its impact will be more positive in the future. And let us lay a foundation stone which is more resilient and correct right now, so that in future it will act as base for the future generation to be in more sustainable way, that can be progressed in a more cohesive and collaborative way in the long run. Next slide, please. So when we come up with these group questions, we came up with a lot of questions which were quite interesting, because when we formulate these, the question we ask ourselves is like how human can better learn from these past mistakes without recommitting it, and also having an ability to prepare more resilience and more build adaptation skills. It's our human construct. When we say that when a hazard occurs, it's actually converted into disaster because of human actions. Like when an earthquake happens, it happens because of the fact that it is the shaking of earth, but the construction, informed construction of humans that caused the deaths. So it's a human action that needs to be framed up. Then the second question which we asked was how society can learn from the connects and disconnects within the society, and how can they build the resilience. When we talk about development, it should be holistic of everyone and considering the last mile. So we, in a process of development, we shouldn't forget that we are ignoring the most vulnerable one, and we are responsible to take actions from that part. So what are the, and also we will be in an era of cascading disaster risk, wherein we will not just facing one risk but multiple risk with compounding impact. So we need to also understand that the dynamics have changed of risk reduction. So we need to understand that we need to prepare certain governance systems that are able and capable enough to redress it. Then the next question we asked was how can human be maintain its nature and technological equilibrium with the values of human ethics, and how we can have a nice balance between the nature and the environment and the societal changes which are happening. So at the end, when we say that the development is happening, it's important that risk reduction aspect should be mainstream in each and every field, not just one particular thing. And then there needs to be a break of silos approach to be broken into a more cohesive and collaborative approach. That is most crucial. So considering the future of 2040, the technological advancement will be created more. So it's the opportunity as well as a challenge, because use of cyber technology can be good and positive. It depends upon who use it and how you use it. So we need to understand that we need to have an approach wherein we consider the challenges as well as the positives and negatives, so that we are heading towards the correct way. Then the next challenge, next question which we asked for ourselves was like how human ethics will be worldwide norms, and how there will be a social transformation which will be more conducive to the environment. It's not about human living, but how we nurture and how we conserve, protect the environment on the basis of which we are living. So it's important that when we drive as a future risk, it's important that we need to consider the past mistakes and take those lessons correctly, so that we rectify it and also constantly learn in the process. We should stop that habit. This is an era of lifelong learning. So we need to understand that whatever we learn, we need to transcend that knowledge and transcend it to the last mile who can utilize it in the better way. And the lastly, which I will feel is most important, is that as human has a social nature, the more nature is social, that he is faced with different challenges, but in the future the cascading risk will be more. So he will be more stressed up. there will be a psychological barrier on him to take, resolve these challenges. So how he will be able to not just only cope with his own health, but also able to, resolve other things that needs to be looked upon. And it's important that, we need to have a holistic and collaborative approach in facing the challenges as well as, solving its challenges. With the end, I would like to, quote Mother Teresa, never allow yourselves to be disheartened until you have given your best. So humanity shouldn't allow itself to be disheartened until it has given its best. So I would say that with that, I will end this, and thank you. Thank you. And I will pass on to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the ILCO team. Wonderful presentation, a very holistic approach. And as you nicely put it, that we need to transform ourselves from being the cause of the problem to become the solution and learn from our past as well as, and you have nicely emphasized the need for collaborative approach. Couldn't agree more with that. So I think it has been very interesting for all of us to hear the different collective ideas on the human behavior and hazard in 2045 from all the teams. I would like to thank all the presenters from the 5 teams and also the members of each team as well for all the hard work during the Future Literacy Lab that we have and in preparing for this presentation as well. Before we move on to the next session, I would like to remind all the participants again that after listening to the presentation, if you have any questions on the team presentation, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A box. We'll be answering them in the Q&A box as well. So now that we have travel to the year 2045, I would like to now take you back to the year 2021, and I would like to handle the moderation back to Dr. Ifa Farhana, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Patamon. Thank you, everyone, for still being here. Hello, my name is Ifa Farhana. I'm from You Inspire Alliance and You Inspire Malaysia. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Now we are back in 2022. We have traveled 2045. Now we are back in 2022. Now I would like to invite 3 speakers with us. Firstly, I would like to invite Mrs. Irina Rafiana, a PhD researcher at the German Development Institute and University of Bonn and researcher of Indonesia National Research and Innovation Agency. The second one is Ms. Iria Tuzon Kaye, Risk Knowledge UNDRR, a regional office for Asia and the Pacific. And also we're going to have Mr. Christian Budi Yusfinit, Resilience and Reconstruction Unit of UNDP Indonesia. I would like to invite all of 3 experts here to turn on your camera and also your microphone. Okay, before we start, I think I'm happy to open up the chance to any of the participants today. If you have any triggering or interesting questions for the speakers, we'd like to invite you to put it in writing and in the chat box, and the speaker will try to answer your question later on. Okay, let the game begin. We're going to have 3 rounds. So I'll take this as a boxing round. So the first round, we already have heard the stimulating and fascinating presentation from all these 5 teams, from these young professionals. They shared their collective thoughts about the futures of human behavior and hazard in 2045. So basically the expert on the different probable and desirable futures, but it has own limitation and expectation as well as on the new questions. Now, I think it will be interesting to hear from your perspectives and your views on the different background and respective expertise that you have here. Maybe we can start with Mrs. Irina, and then maybe followed by Ms. Iria, and then, well, I think the gentleman always give the women first. So yes, please welcome Ms. Irina.
Thank you, Ifa. Hello, everyone. I am Irina. I hope you can hear me clearly because I have my mask on.
We can hear you very good.
Thank you so much. I am hyper fascinated by all of the presentations, and I am learning and taking notes rather than trying to understand everything, because I don't. And I'm really, really happy that different groups have touched base different interesting points. I am very astounded by, for example, the Alpha group addressing how risk transfer mechanism could address asymmetries in disaster risk reduction issues and also disaster injustice. That's how I perceive it. I think that's a very strong statement and very important for us to follow up on that. The Beta group also touched base on how new development demands or lead, how new how demands on new development leads to new disruptions to others. This is also interesting. So now everybody's already thinking non-linearly in a way that disaster is offering us so many complexities, and we're trying to understand that and catch up with that. So this is extremely exciting for me to learn from all of you. The Charlie team, for example, acknowledged the diversity of ideas and how future are defined by being smart, happy, and healthy, although that is seem to be very, very simple, but no, not at all. That's really a fundamental values and future that we're looking at. Although to achieve that, we will go through many different kind of processes as well. And everybody have different accesses to health, to being happy, and also to be smart, for example. And if I take an example from what is happening at the moment today, I think we have to take note about the learning loss generation who could not probably fulfill the need to be smart in 2045. They just simply cannot access the internet facilities to access virtual schools that created more violence in households and also within the communities. And for me, this is very, very interesting point that Charlie team had pointed out. The Delta group also reframe the processes, which I think is very, very interesting as well. What actually triggers me is how they highlighted that artists and art find new approaches. Wow, this is super cool, because I think at this point of time, the artists and arts are really closer to science at the moment. And how this would translate in the near future will be fascinating, because we're no longer see that artists is away from our daily lives. It's even more closer to logics and also science. So for me, pointing this out is extremely important, and this is quite unique from what Delta Group is offering. Of course, beyond the how to incorporate incorporation of religious belief and also perceptions that might change, that also influence how mental health are progressively needed. The ECHO team, I think this is also important. Tushar touched upon the processes that needs to be reframed in actor system, worldview, myth, and discourses. These discourses of saving lives is important. This is going to be the same in the next 2 decades. Are there going to be another competing discourses? So I'm pretty much open to learn more from all of you. Of course, I could not wrap up all of the 5 groups presentation. So again, if I'm rather than telling more about it, I'm just fascinated by how everything is presented. Congratulations to everyone for inspiring others.
Thank you, Mrs. Irena. In fact, when you said about art, because I'm from the Inspire Alliance, we usually use the past 2-3 years, we embedded about science, engineering, technology, innovation, but now we are trying to instill about arts. So that is one way to look at it in terms of DRR. So I think I would like to invite Ms. Iria. What's your thought on this?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ifa. And I couldn't agree more than with Irina that this is fascinating. I've been really listening very carefully and really impressed by the quality and the level of your discussions and the very innovative ideas. I will also not try to come here. I'm not an expert in anything. I think we're here learning from you, from your very interesting discussions. I just would like to pick on the point from Tushar, if I'm not mistaken, from the last group, like how important is that message in raising the awareness of how we are part of the cause and we can be part of the solution. And I think it's part of what we are trying to do also with the advocacy of disasters are not natural. There might be natural hazards, but disasters occur because the choices, the development choices that we take, as you very well pointed out, an earthquake, yeah, is the hazard. It can be a natural hazard, but the kind of constructions and the place we construct, we can have an influence on that. So I think this is a very powerful message, and I think you all came up with very concrete examples of how it is true, like even the climate change.
we also have, it's not just a natural thing that is happening. There is a natural climate variability, but it's because of our consumption and our production patterns that we are creating emissions, and then that is influencing in our climate system. So it's really putting ourselves as part of the cost to become part of that solution. And in that sense, I also found interesting when some of the groups were saying like we need a master plan on resilience. I think that's very interesting. Maybe I will turn it in a way to say maybe we need our development plans to be the master plan for resilience. That's meaning what the colleagues were saying, like all the sectors in their plans, how the infrastructure development, how contribute to reduce the risk, but also how we are aware of the risk from disasters to those infrastructures that we try to develop for economic growth and for access to social services. But if they are not resilient, you might be creating a health infrastructure that then if it's destroyed by a disaster, you're not really improving the level of services. So I think maybe the master plan of resilience should be our development plan, should be our master plan for resilience, because they need to be informed by that risk and the opportunities to prevent and to reduce that risk. I like it also a lot, some of the groups when you were thinking about the challenge around our ways to use the land and our ways to use the natural resources, and that's provide opportunities. We cannot expect like just because we need more energy, we'll just be creating more power plants and that's the solution. And we need to think about also in parallel to just not say, okay, let's just have renewable energies, but in parallel need to come with energy efficiency. Otherwise, we cannot go to the infinite and increasing the supply to respond to increasing demands. The same for water, for example, that's very clear. I'm living in countries where there is water scarcity issues, and they say, okay, let's just more desalination. Desalination has an energy cost, so we cannot go to the infinite in increasing the demand to the supply. So I think really this consumption and production patterns can become more sustainable is essential to contribute to address the drivers of risk. And I also found very interesting some of your reflections around the role of data, artificial intelligence. I think we are very used to hear the notion, the term of data-driven. Should actually be our decisions just data-driven or should be data-informed? So there is the data, there is the evidence from the past, from the forecast, but there also needs to be the human context. It needs to be the insights, and that needs to come in to inform the decision making. So maybe data informed is a more correct term than data driven approaches. And I also was very happy to hear your reflections on the importance of human rights. I think I couldn't agree more on the importance of a human rights-based approach to building resilience and disaster risk reduction. Because it's about engagement and meaningful engagement, not just inviting different stakeholders to receive information, but to be really involved in the decision making, to have the opportunity to influence those decisions that policymakers take. So I think there's so much in what you present that I couldn't really summarize very well, but I think some of these aspects really strike me, and I think you're really on the spot on not acting only upon disasters, but acting upon the risk and the risk drivers. And I think this is the key to influence and change the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Iria. I would like to share my experience when observing them as also the lead facilitator when they having this the lab of 3 days. They come up with an interesting and creative idea that we could not. It is out of beyond our imagination, but they managed to come up with something that I think it's useful in towards 2045. So in terms of probable and desirable futures, Mr. Christian, what's your intake on that?
Thank you, Ifa, for the opportunities. I guess all of the wordings has already been taken by Bay Area in Irina. So this is the difficult part if you will become the last commenter of the presentation. But anyway, I fully agree with Irina and Iria about the observation. I mean, I think as a future thinking, all of this, all of the spectrum that been presented by the presenter is quite interesting, and to some extent also provide different dimension of the thinking, and how to address disaster risk. But my one particular observation on the agenda on the ideas is actually probably not to also forget the development planning processes, because we can come up with hundreds of ideas, but whether it's practical or not to put it into development planning processes, there's another question, right? Because our government, regardless Indonesia or other country, has a rigid term of development planning processes, 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, annually. How to be able to cascade those ideas into practical development practice, that another challenge, I think, because for instance, like if I may give an example, for instance, we for sure globally know there is already a climate projection, right? But if you look into the duration of the climate projections, it's the span of time that the projection present is 30 years. I believe no other government can plan for 30 years to address that issue, right? Because the administration of the government is only 5 years, for instance. So we need to put it down into 5 years period, if I may say. So whether we can agree on the ascending targets, each every 5 years, that could be one of the agenda that I think one of the aspect of thinking that probably need to be also considered in putting the ideas.
Well, thank you for that insight. I think I just put it that way, so maybe we can ponder upon all this interesting perspective that you've given. Okay, done for round one. Now we're going for round two. I hope that's okay. Everyone is still up. So maybe I can start again with Mrs. Irina. As a trained sociology, and you are currently working on social constructions of technology, looking at the Indonesian tsunami warning system. In the probable futures, one of the group collective thoughts mentioned that they identified the weight of the past, which is at present is the technological constraints, the lack of community participation, and the lack of effective DRR governance. With your vast experience for the past 18 years, what do you reflect on this thought? Do you agree that those are happening at present now?
Thank you very much, Ifa. This is a very, very important question and not easy to answer. My quick response to that would be this particular point that you mentioned, technological constraints, lack of community participations, and lack of effective governance. It happens even 100 years before. It will happen again, probably 100 years in the future, because everything is continuously changing. The way we perceive technologies, the way we perceive participations, the way we perceive governance. Now, I would say we will continuously felt constrained, but at the same time change dramatically by technologies. I think we need to be brave enough in speculating, in imagining this, of which now playing the devil's advocate, the presentation from all of the 5 groups could perhaps benefit more of these kind of provoking imaginations into more in-depth. We are at the moment already have changes in the way technologies in surveillance are playing a role in prisons, in the streets, schools, and so on and so forth. With that, how does that influence the way we manage disaster or govern risks, or even induce new vulnerabilities towards risk? We have technologies in business transactions. Technologies also open windows to understand human nature and also earth and space. But on the other hand, does that help us to strengthen our understanding about circular economy? that, or did that actually increase our desire to consume? So these kind of critical questions need to be addressed in a more kind of, how do you call it, speculative way. And I think it is really our time here to do that and discuss that with the support, with a facilitation from colleagues from UNDRR, from UNDP, UInspire. I note here there's Nadia also from CSIS, the Disaster Risk Management Studies. Probably they can jump in and also facilitate such discussions. And I think we are also dealing with severe consequences of cascading risks. But at the moment, how we address risk is quite deterministic still. How can we project to change that within 2 decades and probably shift towards a more hands-on probabilistic approach? While we always say, oh no, probabilistic approach is too expensive, we cannot afford it, it's just too complicated for the local government. Why are we constraining ourselves in that? Why are we not including artificial intelligence from this very point on towards the near future in the next 2 decades, for example? So these issues are not really difficult for us to think about, because we are, for example, if we're looking at how cascading risk is happening at the moment, and we only do the deterministic approaches, which means our risk assessment will only lead us to failures, right? So how are we going to go about that? And I think we also need to incorporate these different qualitative measures that is difficult to quantify. For example, greed and consumptions, new discriminations and segregations that happen now. Didn't happen 10 years ago, but happen now. For example, the colored and Black communities being discriminated in conflict zones in different continents. And in the next 20 years, we're no longer going to be constrained with, how do you call it, nation territories. It's going to be even more cross boundaries with the improvement of technologies, how we are going to go about that. So these kind of triggering thoughts needs to be further discussed with colleagues here. So I would imagine, as O'Brien and Forbes in 2021 wrote in the Journal of Future Studies, that speculating and futuring is actually important, and it can inform long-term disaster risk reduction planning. Fictional and scenario-based approach is important, but how we do that? We're not in the culture of thinking fictions. We think that fictions are apart from reality. Well, actually fictions, art and science can actually construct the new reality. So these kind of things need to be integrated, perhaps, and that will help us embrace uncertainties and the complexities and exercise our wild imagination. So why not? On transformations, I would say there's going to be a massive transformation from man to machine. Artificial intelligence and robotic decisions are mentioned by all of the colleagues in the group. There's going to be even more robust and affordable technologies. But then at the same time, entanglements of technologies and politics with cultures and emotions and beliefs. These are kind of interestingly touched base by, have you watched the Netflix Social Dilemma? Oh, you should. So only because the way we can actually understand how deeply embedded all of these social values in technologies and how it changes the social forms. So it's very dialectical between one another, and it's very interesting and also important. So might as well try to work towards that. There's going to be transboundary issues that criticize dogmatic nationalism. How are we going to prepare ourselves on that? So that's also another critical question. But I also have, so Ifa, rather than you questioning, I have questions also for others. So why not exercise these questions as well? Because I don't know everything. I have even more questions. Who are the voices remained left behind? Bravo team touched upon this a little bit, but we could elaborate that further. And what are the new forms of discriminations and segregation that can take forms in the future, and why? Lastly, at the moment we are thinking that the world in the future are very much formed by human perspectives, assuming that humans have the utmost power over the world. But how about the non-human behaviors? How does the non-human behaviors affect human? And okay, I stop there. I intend to provoke and so excited to join the further discussions if there are any. Thank you so much, Ifa, and everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Irina. So there's a lot of triggering questions, a lot of you touched base on many things. But I would like to share also that when the young professional had experience during the lab, they had to close their eyes and they imagine as if that there are no constraint at all, so they can imagine regardless anything. So they imagine as further as, that's why we, one of the reasons we said in 2045, meaning there's no restriction. Apart from that, I think what you mentioned, and well, of course I leave the question to the experts because I'm just still learning, just 1 or 2 years in DRR area. But anyway, I think I'll leave the next session to Mr. Christian, because you said that you was last. Now I putting you on the second. I hope that's okay. So in one of the group presentation, it mentioned on a new question, stating that humans need to learn better from its previous mistake without recommunicating. This can be commented by having better adaptation, building resilience, and to integrate the idea of disaster resilience in personal life. This is somehow an issue that has happened in the past and is still happening in the present, probably seems might continuously to happen in future. So as resilient and reconstruction expert, and of course I know that you are also have 18 years of experience in area of DRR, same as Mrs. Irina. Maybe you can share us what is your thought on this?
Yeah, I think I also would like to echo what Irina mentioned previously. I mean, even the risk itself is also evolving. I mean, not just the risk, the hazard itself is also evolving, if I may say. So adaptability is a must, if I may say, regardless what type of risk. But the key part is actually whether we have the capacity to understand or comprehend the risk itself, whether we have sufficient information, whether we have sufficient tools, whether we have sufficient technology to understand the diversity of risk in our society. That's one thing. And I also would like to address some point of view with regards to resilience. I believe that all of the presenter mentioned about having this resilience. What is the term? Would it resilience community or resilient behavior? But I just wondering one particular question. Actually, I would like to ask also to the to the presenter, what is the resilience capacity in their perspective? What is actually resilience capacity in their perspective? Because in my personal perspective, resilience capacity is actually the way that we can understand the risk. We can also act upon it, how to respond, and how we can recover. So those three elements has to be incorporated. It cannot be separated or segregated as an individual action. It has to be cohesive and in harmony. So why I said about that is actually because if we talk about resilience capacity, it means that we have the adaptability capacity to understand the risk and also to respond, and also how we can be able to recover, because there are some element of hazard that we cannot avoid, right? Regardless what we do, for instance, such as earthquake or tsunami, whatever, regardless of what we do, whenever it happened, it still poses another dimension of risk. So that's also one of the things that I can say that having an adaptability capacity at the smaller level of social structure is important, starting from ourselves, for instance. And of course, we need to, each individual has to have this kind of understanding, and then scale it up or scale it wide to the families and also the surrounding communities. That's also one of the things that we can do at this time. But bearing in mind that we also have limitation of technological instruments and also thinking capacity. Because like it or not, even the literature we don't have a much comprehensive literature to understand the dimension of the risk itself. Not to mention risk, but the hazard itself. And if we talk also about certain type of hazard, for instance, like man-made hazard, there's also pose another dimension. And if we talk, for instance, like what recently happened, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, it also created different dimension. Because in pandemic, like in the recent pandemic, or still, I think it's still happening, it's still pandemic now. Whatever intervention that we did to recover from this pandemic has to be treated as a protracted process. Because in certain time, we don't know whether the virus will be evolving, right? So we have to repeat the process of providing additional response capacity before we can actually achieve the goal of the recovery itself, right? So we have to look back again and see whether we have the capacity to deal with this different dimension of risk or not. So similar to the way we handle a protracted crisis situation. So sometimes we have to move back. We cannot just continue moving forward, but we have to also look back what is actually the situation at the time. And interesting part is actually presented also, was also like to echo the presentation from Group Bravo, because if I'm mistaken, in certain slide number, they mentioned that LNOB is a myth. I'm just curious about that. What exactly what exactly the presenter mean by LNOB is a myth? Because LNOB, if I may say, or leaving no one behind, is already become the backbone of all, not just DRR, but all of the development initiative. But the challenge at the time is actually how we can ensure that all of people that we consider disadvantaged are able to participate. For instance, if I may say about people with disability, for instance, as let's just reflect it from the condition in Indonesia, because I understand very much in Indonesia, all of the disaster risk information that we have at the time. So my question probably whether it's also already addressed the needs of people with disability to access that information. That's still a big, huge homework for us. We talk about people with sight impaired. We talk about people with mostly with the sensory impaired. So how can we provide that kind of information and they can use it? That's another challenge, because digital technology may have the solution, but how we can use that technology to provide that kind of instrument with people with specific needs, there's another homework that probably we still need to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. I think I would like to respond on you said that we should look back instead of forward. Interestingly, during the lab, one of the tools that they have is the future triangle, which is, of course, we look back. That is one exercise I think that is very, very beneficial for this young professional. And yes, apparently when you touch on the leave no one behind by the Bravo team, I was there during the discussion. Interestingly, that they said they are so optimistic that everyone is already resilient. So the myth of leave no one behind is no longer there, because everyone is already resilient and empowered. But nevertheless, I think I'll move to Ms. Iria. On the premise of this future literacy lab, human behavior can intensify hazards or can create new hazards. Either it could be natural, could be man-made, or combination of both. In the presentation by all those 5 teams earlier, they mentioned that at present in 2022, most of risk mitigation, well, we know risk mitigation consists of 2 structural measures and non-structural measures. So we look at the structural measures to minimize exposure and physical vulnerabilities, but not necessarily look at the human decision and action as factors creating risks, which I think it need to change. One of the new questions also asked on DRR policy that includes consider human behavior. I think we understand that we need to also to have a clear understanding and definition of human behavior, or what or which human behavior that we're focusing on. As the risk knowledge and analysis officer of UNDRR, how do you see decision and actions influencing risk, and what do you think that we should do better to change all this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yufa. Now is my challenge because I'm coming last, and our previous commenters were very bright in addressing their questions. So what can we change? What can we do better? Maybe let me pick on the point on risk, understanding risk and risk assessment and data. So I think so far the risk assessment have been focusing a lot on understanding the hazards, but we need to do better understanding the vulnerabilities and the multiple dimensions. So it's not only the physical vulnerability, how a building might behave, but also the socioeconomic vulnerabilities, why people live in flood-prone areas. Maybe it's not because they want to, because maybe there's land right issues, there is issues in access to affordable housing. So those aspects of socioeconomic vulnerabilities need to be better integrated into the risk assessment process. And then I think it's very clear from what we are saying that we cannot use the past to predict the future, but still we need to learn from the past. So when we collect data about the impact of disaster, I think one point to enable this leave no one behind is to ensure that the way we collect data, we are collecting data in a disaggregated manner. So we understand the impact of disaster in different people that have different vulnerabilities and have different exposure levels. So, so disaggregated by sex, disaggregated by age, by income growth, by location, by ethnicity. So collecting the data of the impact of disaster in a disaggregated manner will help us better understand the differentiated impact, and then help us better also in projecting what could be the impact in the future, and building policies that address these differentiated impacts. And I think when we'll focus more on the part of the vulnerability rather than the hazard, we have more to do. So we have, for example, opportunities like, for example, look at the social protection. It's so important, health, universal health care. How important is this to make sure we see it in the context of the pandemic? Social protection mechanisms, how important is that when you lose your job? If you have access and types of social protection, you can cope better with the impact of losing your job because of the pandemic, or because an earthquake destroyed your business, or whatever. So if we focus on the vulnerability part more, I think we can say bigger. We have more opportunities to reduce the risk than when we focus only on the hazard. Sometimes we feel a little bit constrained, like, okay, what can we do? Maybe just build better. But and there are many opportunities to strengthen our resilience and our capacities. And I like the point from Christian on the capacities, right? Because we cannot only strengthen capacities by doing training. We need to think how people learn and how adults learn. So we not only learn through trainings, and I think that's very important for disaster management authorities. It's not just about doing training, that we will change the way systems work. So that's why I found this exercise you are doing very interesting, engaging in dialogues with different people, with different views, try to imagine the future. That help us also in strengthening capacities to understand what is the risk and bring this understanding to action. So it's not doing risk assessment for the sake of risk assessment, is using that risk information for the planning, for the investment decisions, for which kind of measures, and deciding which kind of measures are better to address those risks. And I think that point of living with uncertainty that colleagues highlighted. So what we can do, if there is still, despite of all the projections, analysis, risk assessment we do, there is an important aspect of uncertainty about the future. So what we can do, we can always think about non-regret actions, regardless of that event happened or not. If we, for example, make agriculture systems, if we use more drought-resistant crops, maybe even if there's not a drought, we can have better crops, and then our farmers will be in a better position, and they are using less water. They will be in a better position to have saving for something else. So non-regret actions, I think, are very important when we think about this uncertainty on the future and what we can do better in DRR and disaster risk reduction, and integrating in that in all the sectors. And I think all the points you have raised here around the building better with nature or integrating better environment, that's essential, that we don't position ourselves like we can control everything in the nature, but we need to be part of the solution as well for environmental conservation. And I think we hear a lot about nature-based solutions, but really from piloting nature-based solutions to really using that as the approach, the most efficient approach in light of all these uncertainties, I think is one of the important takeaways. Like, and also from your presentations, nature-based solutions are no-regret actions and have many different co-benefits, regardless of not if a hazard materialized. So I think there's a very interesting key takeaway from hearing the different groups, how you really value also this aspect of building with environment and environmental conservation as a full part as well of strengthening resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Iria. A lot of key takeaways there. Well, I think maybe you can take a deep breath, maybe take a sip of water, because we are entering the round 3 and this will be the final round. Okay, let me get back to all of you here. Although that you did not experience the lab for the 3 days lab to see the process of how does future literacy went by, and how the participants learn and went about the discussion and their wild imaginations, but you are here now to witness their outcomes and the result of their discussion in their presentation earlier on. You also have heard the clear explanation by our respective Ms. Leia Shosi from UNESCO Futures Literacy team that explained briefly about FLL. So now I think maybe, well, I give the floor, the honor to Mr. Christian now, the first round, and then followed by Ms. Ira and also Mrs. Irina. As you, the experts in your field, in your opinion, does embedding futures literacy skills could be useful in the field of the disaster risk reduction? But I would like to note a little bit, maybe you can give us your insight within 3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Irsa. I think, yeah, in my personal view, I think it's very important because literacy is the key of building the capacity and the knowledge of the people. So I think we need to ensure and also emphasize that literacy is a must. But on the other hand, as we are moving along developing this literacy system through this future literacy labs, I think the other aspect that we need to also take into account is the accessibility of those literacy materials, right? Because not all of the people or not all of the youngsters that have technology savvy knowledge, but we also need to think about how about the elderly, how about the indigenous people, how about the community that located with a lack of communication infrastructure. Those kind of parameters need to be also considered, because if we only rely on based on the pace of the development of new technology, these people who live in remote area, elder people, indigenous community, they for certain will be left behind. So how we can ensure that this literacy can also address their needs to build their capacity and knowledge. That's one of the I think one of the key challenges and probably recommendation to improve the accessibility of this literacy lab. That from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can hear from Ms. Iria.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ifa. I think it's very interesting. I wasn't necessarily familiar what is future literacy and what these labs are expected to bring. So First of all, congratulations. I think it's been very interesting. I'm bringing very interesting insights. I think maybe one thing that strikes me when we talk about DRR is that we tend to think a lot as this being a very technical matter that is for engineers, for flood engineers, for earthquake engineers, and not that much something that is also something that needs to be a practice that needs to be embedded in all social science, practice that needs to be embedded also in other type of decision makers. So I think maybe when bringing this to governments and their stakeholders, what is interesting is to highlight that DRR is not a technical area. It's not only for engineers, and it's not only about the mitigation, the hazard mitigation, but every single sector, every single academia, every single practitioner need to bring it to their own reality and integrate it in their approaches. So what does it mean for the education sector? Many of you highlighted, and it's not just about including in the curriculum, but also in the practice and the way the infrastructure of education is managed, in the way the schools are managed, in the way the schools infrastructure are built. So I think what will be very interesting is to bring this to all domains and all sectors, and to really use this opportunity with future literacy to highlight that this is not a technical matter, and it's not only responsibility of your disaster management authorities in your country to think about DRR. That is really all the different sectors' responsibility, and that even if they are not the one building dams or building tsunami walls, they always have an opportunity to think about how their development plans and their sectors reduce risk or are contributing to increase the risk if they don't consider that. So I think very interesting opportunities, and I always enjoy hearing from Irina. I know she comes from a social science perspective, so I always enjoy hearing her perspective, and just to encourage that there is more and more research on DRR coming from social science, because we need that to really advocate. It's not a technical matter. It's just not about building a tsunami wall. It's really about behaviors, about social construct of risk, and how we are also part of the risk reduction and from all sectors and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iria. I think I would like to touch base a bit on the insight from Ms. Iria and also Mr. Christian earlier on. Since this is actually our Let's Talk DRR number 3, previously we had 2 series. The second one, we touched on futures of disaster risk knowledge. In that, we train a little bit how does we maneuver on DRR and knowledge. This is what I would like to bounce back on what Mr. Christian said, that we build capacity and build knowledge for those who are maybe not have the opportunity to get the technology and whatnot. So in that series, we managed to enhance a small group of young professionals to do that. In terms of this highlight of no technical matter that mentioned by Ms. Ria, interestingly, it mentioned on in the first series where we talk about futures of disaster risk governance. So in that, we managed to explore a little bit what should be highlight, what should be investigate more. I think I've give Mrs. Irina too long for rest without talking. So now I think this is this is your time to maybe reflect. What does your intake to instill FLL in DRR? Go on.
I hope I'm not boring everybody with too many long talks and ideas, but I'm joining Iria's message all through the way, and also Mas Christo's message as well. Let us just pick again what Ms. Leah Houses had proposed, that futures are socially constructed. So, and I think it is important that the future literacy be experimental. And it should go beyond traditional approaches of learning. So this is like actually what I could grasp of what the future literacy lab is trying to do. And I'm sure that the FFL have contributed profoundly to this. And I think an exercise was held by the Indonesian Ministry of Research and Technology in 2018, at that time, Ristek Dikti, on how the studies on technology foresight for disaster risk reduction 2045 was developed. So the document is already there. If you're interested, feel free to approach me, and I will ask Mr. Agustan from Brink to share the document as well. It's very interesting because we are really experimenting with scenarios here. What I would like to also underline, again, joining Iria's message, visual emotions and also sense needs to be incorporated in such planning. And experimental processes, only experimental process allows that. But to move forward from this point further, maybe we can also start thinking not only without constraints, but actually with new constraints, or constraints that we didn't foresee. It is a constraint, but it's actually is, and it's going to be significant even more in the future. So these kind of thinking processes are needed. I always love experimental processes, but then to link that back again together with Mas Christo at UNDP, together with Iria at UNDRR, and inform different governments in their development planning is the next step to be really practical and critical. I don't think such systematic way is designed at the moment collectively. Hey, why not? let's go one step further. Let's now reach out to national disaster management agencies and plannings and Ministry of Finances and see how they interact with these ideas. It's an experiment. So I'm also up for that, to join all of you. So congratulations again. And Ifa, wonderful moderation. Thank you so much for the learning process today.
Thank you, Mrs. Irina. Well, apparently we have here interesting insight. Well, actually, very comprehensive from all of you here about what we have been talking on today. Let me recap a bit of what we've discussed. It is like we mentioned that we should not only move forward, but we also need to look back. But somehow, by FLL is actually to train each and every one of us that go to the lab to have wider perspective, to expect more, to anticipate more, and to strategize for better decision. But also in a way, we could also build more capacity and build knowledge, but not only from the small group, it could be grow bigger and bigger. And I think I would like to reflect on what Ms. Ina mentioned, be experimental. Funny thing that before the lab, we had a session we call as co-design. This co-design, we actually a bunch of young professionals, we design how does the lab goes. And the first session, we mentioned that learning by doing. So in a way, that is actually experimental. And you said that by having visual and emotion, it cannot technical put it on writing. It should be only experienced by experimental, which I think that allows that. So taking on the point that we also need to be practical and also critical. With the time that is very goal for us, I think we would like to wrap up our session. I think all of us are winner here from our 3 sessions. Maybe I would like to thank a huge thank to Mrs. Irina here, Ms. Iria, and also Mr. Christian for the wonderful perspective. I think maybe from here we can also proceed on further of futures activities, and also I would like to remind to all participants here, if you have any questions that you would like to ask with our experts here, please put in the Q&A box. I think I will give back to the MC, Ms. Afifa.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Ipa. Okay, before we start for the Q&A session, maybe please welcome Mr. Ardhito Kodijat as a Disaster Risk Reduction and Tsunami Information Unit, UNESCO Jakarta, and also our Father for Future Literacy Laboratory on Disaster Knowledge. So, Mr. Ardhito, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Afifa. I think I'll first join Ifa in giving our highest appreciations to Irina, to Christian, to Iria, and also to Leah in their insight, as well as a lot of new food for thought that came out from the discussion with Dr. Ifa in that session. I think there are a lot of things that we can actually take forward in terms of what we have been doing through this futures literacy labs in disaster risk reduction. So again, thank you very much for that. Second, I also would like to take this opportunity to really convey my appreciations to the futures literacy sections of UNESCO in headquarters, who have been actually supporting our activities from the start. We developed this proposal jointly between UNESCO, UNDP Accelerator Lab, UNDRR, and Inspire Alliance. We shared this with the futures literacy sections, and immediately they supported fully throughout the activities. And I'm happy that throughout this, at least we have more than almost 200 youth and young professionals are now futures literate, or hopefully they are able to use these futures literacy skills as part of their daily activities. I don't think I think there are a lot of questions and answers that has been provided in the Q&A sections. We try to respond to all the questions in the Q&A. So I'm considering the time that we have, I'm not going to respond each of that, but I also really appreciate the attentions and the interest of the participants in the Q&A. To be frank, we have 3 futures literacy labs, and I think maybe because of the topic, this human behavior and hazard is very interesting. We have a lot of questions at this time, which is also very interesting questions. And also the questions is actually intriguing us to think further based on that question. So again, thank you very much. This is actually the last futures literacy labs of our programs that we designed jointly between UNESCO, UNDP, ACT Lab, and UNDRR and Inspire Alliance. Our next activities is trying to bring this futures literacy or future thinking in disaster risk reductions to the global platform for disaster risk reduction. We apply for side events, we apply for the innovation platforms, or we will look for other means so that we can actually share the lessons learned, the experience, the new skills that the youth and young professionals has embraced in the next global platform for disaster risk reduction. So, and as you know, this is a teamwork effort. So a lot of people who are actually involved in these activities are on voluntary basis. They actually really contribute their time, they really contribute their thoughts, they really contribute their many things, and I really appreciate that. And again, this is really an exemplary group efforts that has been taken throughout our one-year journey into the futures, especially 2045, through governance, knowledge, as well as human behavior and hazard. So thank you very much. Back to you, Afifa.
Thank you so much, Pak Ardhito. Okay, now in consideration of time, again and again, we all thank you for young professional presenters from 5 teams and the speakers, Mrs. Irina, Miss Iria, and also Mr. Christian for sharing their views, stuff, and knowledge. We hope this Let's Talk DRR is interesting for you and triggers you interesting in our future thinking on disaster risk reduction activities. This is the last session, and if you're interested to join this Future Literacy Laboratory, please contact Unesco, UNDP, Accelerator Lab, or Inspired Alliance. The email is in the chat box. Thank you for your kind attention, and hopefully you will join our next activities. Have a nice remaining days and great weekend. Stay safe and keep healthy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Afifah.
Thank you very much, Iria. Thank you very much, Irina. Thank